Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to Misophonia Questions and Answers with me, Tom Dozier. I am the president of the Misophonia Institute, and I have been studying misophonia for 12 and a half years now. And so I'm happy to get together with everyone today. I've announced in the meeting, or in one of the announcements, we'll talk about counterconditioning. I'm here to answer any questions that anyone has. So does anyone have any questions first to start us off? Or do we want to go into the counter conditioning? So my rule here is you can raise your hand if you want, but I'm not really great at seeing the raised hand, and you're welcome to unmute yourself and ask a question whenever I say, does anyone have a question? So I see Harriet has her hand up. Harriet, I muted you earlier, so go ahead and ask your question.
As usual, I have a question, Tom.
Good.
And this, kind of regards the Doppler effect. My thing, of course, okay, alert, I can't, high voices, whining, repetitive verbalization. The problem being a woman, being pretty much alone by choice, but and not being xenophobic, rather xenophiliac. I am very interested in people I have not met yet. You know what I mean? And I'm very not interested in joining a group where we intentionally don't take in other people, But I find that after exposure to a single person for a while, that feels almost very best friendish, suddenly I discover the whininess, whether it's familiarity breeding contempt or what, I don't know. And then I can't handle that voice. And it is always a whining, childish voice. But I think when people become familiar with one, perhaps they go to that place a little more familiar. This is how I always get attention. But I actually feel really badly when other people notice I seem to be avoiding or rejecting someone who doesn't understand why. And the Doppler effect is you don't hear a sound that much when it's far away. Only when it gets close, it gets really intense, and then when it goes away, it fades out. And I'm afraid that's me. You know
Okay.
what I mean? Okay.
So let me see if I can answer that question. So basically, I'm going to rephrase your question, Harriet, to a more global, general question. Is why do certain sounds trigger me and other similar sounds don't? And along with that, why is it in your case that a person that's new to you is not a trigger, but after a while their voice becomes a trigger?
Yes, it before it honestly, it's not like I'm fighting it down in myself. I just don't hear it, and then
It's not a trigger.
And then I kind of start to recognize it.
Okay. So triggers are an acquired reflex, and that's through Pavlovian conditioning is the physical component of that trigger. And so the way a stimulus becomes a conditioned stimulus to cause the reflex or a learned trigger, it includes both the context and the sound, the setting, who or what's making it. And so, Harriet, there's something to you. You mentioned that you like to get to know people, right? You like the newness of meeting people.
Yep.
So there's another factor I'm going to throw in here, and that is the mood that you're in a given point in time affects your triggers. So when you first meet a person, the context of that is that they are a new person, and therefore for you that's not a trigger. Now I do know other people who, when somebody is more familiar to them, this is less common, it's less of a trigger than somebody that's new. So part of the problem here is the context is changing as you get to know them. The context also affects many people. For example, with eating sounds where the sound of a person eating is a trigger, but the sound of an animal um, or a baby eating is not a trigger. So context is coming into play here. The other thing that could be happening is that at first it's because of the context, it's not a trigger. And then as you're with them more, you start to notice little characteristics in their voice that are triggers for you.
It's kind of
And
like starting to analyze. Yeah.
yes, and when you analyze it, you say, oh, that sounds like my
Yes.
son-in-law, my father, my mother, my Aunt Sarah, my old friend from whatever. And you
Right.
start saying, oh, that sound is like them. And that sound for my
Mm.
relative or old friend is a trigger. Therefore, this sound becomes a trigger.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. Very
So
much.
this is not unusual, but I don't have a great solution other than trying to be more relaxed around the people and um, trying to focus on other things that are not triggers. If you start looking for a trigger, if you say, well, I've been friends with known this person for 3 months now, I wonder why they're not triggering me. I wonder why their voice isn't triggering me. And you start paying attention to their voice, it'll
Yep.
become a trigger.
Um, I will say, when I get to the point of desperation, I have told 3 people, well, I have misophonia. I mean, I blurt it out. It's not easy because to me, it's also saying you're triggering me, which seems like a pretty awful thing to say. But I must say, I feel somewhat relieved after saying that. I do. Even if they
Uh,
have to go look it up, I feel like I shared who I actually am that I'm trying to hide all my life. Yeah. So it helps. It really does. Talking about it a little.
right. And I would agree that that's a common well, I encourage people to say that they have misophonia with friend groups, with peer groups, with people that they're with, because misophonia is a very common condition.
Yeah.
The vast majority of people that I've talked to on an airplane, when I mention misophonia, either they have misophonia or they know someone who has misophonia. So it's a common condition. It is not uh, it's not a judgment about them. It's a reflex condition, and that may be the easiest way to say, look, I have this reflex condition called misophonia, and certain sounds trigger me, so I apologize, but that's just the way my brain is.
Thank you. Thank you. That really helps. And because it's letting them off the hook and not
Right,
pinpoint. Thank you.
right. You're welcome. Okay, Sean, you have your hand up.
Hey Tom, I have a comment and then I have a question.
Okay.
So I wanted to tell Harriet, I also have voice triggers and they absolutely suck. So I definitely understand you. Um, and I guess my comment is about context. So a lot of times I'll be reading something on the computer and my focus is on that. And then my like an animal, like my cats, will be eating or licking themselves. And that definitely triggers me, but I've been working on context. So I actually, part of it is that all my focus is on reading, and then I hear this annoying sound and I start, it triggers me. So
Mm-hmm.
what I've started to do, and it's provided a little bit of relief, is to take my focus off of reading and just take a step back because I think the fact that I'm focused on something and then this really annoying sound starts to take my focus away, it causes the anger to build more. So if I change the context of my energy of focusing on reading and I just kind of stop reading and I just kind of focus on relaxation techniques, then my trigger isn't as strong. Um, so my question for Tom is, can you kind of explain, I know you've told us about when you first learned about misophonia, but at what point did you truly grasp like how much of a reaction it has for us? And I'm hoping that you could also kind of go into detail about when we approach somebody about misophonia and trying to explain it to them. How do you initially explain it? And then if they're not getting it, how do you further explain it? So those are my
Okay.
questions.
Okay, so let me see if I get your first. There are multiple questions here, and
Yes, sorry.
I'm a 72-year-old brain here. See if I can remember those. So, the
Okay.
first question was, when did I actually kind of start to understand how serious the reactions of misophonia were? Is that your first question?
Yes, because it seems like everybody that first learns about it, they just either don't believe it or don't understand the severity that it affects us. So at what point did
Okay.
you feel like you truly grasp it? Because it's very rare, I think, to talk to somebody who doesn't have misophonia but truly grasps it.
Okay, so I think probably the time that I grasped the seriousness of the emotional reactions of misophonia was in it was in the fall of 2013 at the first annual Misophonia Association convention. And at that convention, one person was sharing, and he said, it's just so hard. The emotions are so strong. He said, I was on the airplane on the way out here. He said that about 3 rows in front of me, a baby started crying. And he said, if it would have been possible, I would have jumped over the seats and put my hand over the baby's mouth to make it stop screaming, stop crying. And like, I go like, wow, that's incredible. But it really took me a long time, and I still don't fully perceive the agony that you experience when you're triggered because I have never been triggered. Okay, when misophonia is bad enough to have um, an anesthesiologist in Denver area who went into the recovery room and was silencing the audible alarms, which is a big no-no, confronted by a nurse, and he choked the nurse, grabbed her around the neck, lifted her up, and then let her go and retired. So I know it exists, but I've never been triggered. So it's really hard for a person who doesn't have misophonia to comprehend that you have a horrible, horrible experience. That was the first question. What was your second question, Sean?
Uh, the second question was when you're explaining it to somebody for the first time, what's a really good approach for that? And then the third question is if they're still not grasping the severity of it, how do you approach like a second or third conversation?
Okay. So I minimize the emotional part of misophonia when I write a 504 plan letter requesting accommodations for a child in school or for work accommodations. I talk about misophonia as a reflex condition, a neurological, behavioral reflex condition where people hear certain sounds and they're basically um, they get jolted by their brainstem response for and that jolt to the body is intrusive and unpleasant and triggers extreme intense negative emotions. That to me from requesting accommodation sounds better than saying when John hears somebody eating, he feels rage. That doesn't that sounds a little bit more nutty than that this is a reflex condition, so it's not it's involuntary. Um, but I think you just have to say, this is my general advice, kind of what I mentioned to Harriet, is that when I hear certain, I have misophonia, and when I hear certain sounds, it triggers an intense, physiological and emotional response that's extremely unpleasant, or it triggers a reaction that is extremely unpleasant. And that's kind of where I would take it. Now, the next thing you said is if they don't get it, I have a video on misophonia.org that is Misophonia, What Is It? Which tries to describe this condition for somebody who wants to understand. But a lot of people don't want to get it. I don't know that they don't want to get it. It's just like, I can't see it. Misophonia is an invisible disability, and therefore it's difficult to deal with. Did I answer all your questions? I
I
think I
believe
did.
so.
I think I
Thank you,
did.
Tom.
You're
You did.
welcome, son.
Thank you.
Okay, Justine, your hand's up.
Hey there. So I've been struggling with this for most of my life. I started getting triggered. Like, I remember my first trigger, I think I was about 11 years old, and I'm now 23, and I've been spending many, many years trying to figure out different things that would work for me. You actually helped me when I was in high school to get on a 504 program, and it's been wonderful and has helped me a lot. But I guess it's been up and down. Like, there are times, and I'm sure context has a lot to do with it. There are times where I feel like my sensory issues and my misophonia is heightened, and then there are times when it'll kind of go away, or not be gone, but be lessened. And I don't know, lately I guess I've been struggling a lot, and I feel like I've come to the conclusion that the only thing that can really help me at this point is basically exposing myself to my triggers. And maybe I can do that in a way that, I start slow. I'm not just taking myself away. Because what I do right now, I guess, is I wear headphones and I play sounds like white noise that helps me. And I don't want to have to do that, because I almost feel like having done that for the last almost 10 years has made it worse.
Okay.
If that makes sense. But
Yep.
So I guess my question would be, other than exposing myself to my triggers, do you have advice for what I could do to, I don't know, I guess, calm myself when I'm feeling that way?
Okay. So Justine, you made a comment that sometimes your triggers are worse, sometimes they're less. A lot has to do with your mood and health and well-being. If you're stressed, if you're tired, if you're hungry, if you're getting sick, if you're PMSing, those factors, anything that increases your anxiety, increases your misophonia. So there are health benefits. You should take good care of your health. The second thing I want to say is that I will give a further answer to your question a little bit later, as soon as we get rid of a few, I don't mean get rid of, as soon as we answer a few more questions. I want to talk about counter conditioning. Just exposing yourself to triggers is not a good idea, but running from triggers is also not a good idea. So if you're trying to block all the triggers, that in and of itself makes them such a big deal that tends to make them get worse with time. So, but let me give a more complete answer on counter conditioning as soon as we take care of the question in the hands that are up. Okay, Justine?
Okay, thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. Elsa, you may ask your question now.
Hello, hi.
Hi.
My name is PJ. So Elsa is my friend.
Okay.
But we're both listening all to it. So how many questions am I allowed to ask?
Let's start with one right now, and then
Okay.
we'll come back and have more time later.
Okay, that's wonderful. So I have a question then. Is it worth it to get a diagnosis for misophonia, and where can I get it? As well as what are the pros and cons of having this diagnosis
Okay.
in South Africa?
In South Africa. Okay, so now I was going to ask, where are you located? A diagnosis that says Elsa has. I'm sorry. I didn't pick up your name exactly. What is your name again?
PJ.
The T, like TJ, like the initials.
Like PJ, yeah, like the
Pajamas,
initials.
but PJ. Okay.
Yeah.
So PJ, if you get a diagnosis of misophonia, people aren't going to know what to do with it anyway. So usually a diagnosis doesn't, well, first off, it's very hard to get a formal diagnosis because it's not in the DSM, it's not in the ICD, and you need to find somebody who they'll typically give you like an anxiety diagnosis or anxiety not otherwise specified or something. I write up a letter that explains misophonia and for the United States how it qualifies for accommodations, or in South Africa, I would say how it should qualify if accommodations are allowed, specified by law there. But that it's a condition where, and then I explain what it is. It's a reflex condition. And so when people hear a misophonia trigger, let me pull up something on my slides here, and I'm not. Let me try to find. Well, I'm looking for my simple model of misophonia. Okay, let's go with this one. So here is a simple model of misophonia, and you hear the sound, and there is a physical reflex in your body. Most people with misophonia do not recognize this reflex under normal situations, but when I work with a person, using an app. I have an app that's called the Misophonia Reflex Finder app, and it's a free app for a smartphone, Android and iPhone, and you can play a trigger very, very soft and short, so that it just barely bumps your body, and you don't have the extreme emotions. You might have annoyance, but getting a little, if on a 0 to 10 scale, where 10 is the max possible trigger, if it's at a 1 or a 2, then that's in an area where you can usually feel where it is. And so I define it as, for this particular person, it clenches muscles in their shoulders and their jaw when they hear these certain sounds, and these are intrusive and trigger intense negative emotions. So, but actually having a diagnosis, they're hard to get. In the United States, there are audiologists, some audiologists who'll give a diagnosis of misophonia. There are some psychologists who will give a diagnosis for misophonia. What I do as a behaviorist is I write a letter that says I'm providing treatment for this person for misophonia, and this is what misophonia is. That sounds like a diagnosis, or like I'm acknowledging that they have a diagnosis, but it's not officially a diagnosis. Okay. So let me, is there another immediate question? Because I'd like to go into counter-conditioning, which answers some of the questions that we've had from Justine and others, and then we'll come back for more questions.
No, you can first answer the other questions.
Okay, so let me talk about counter-conditioning. So counter-conditioning is experiencing a trigger in a way that is counter to the normal brainstem reflex. I like to call where's my little slideshow here, right? I have my, the brain, you have your cerebrum, your limbic system, you have your autonomic nervous system, and I like to call this the lizard brain. A chameleon lizard crawls up on a rock and turns brown, crawls up on a leaf and turns green. No idea what brown or green is. That lizard brain's job is to keep you alive, and it has the ability to develop new reflexes, which is called Pavlovian conditioning. And so with that reflex, once it develops, it strengthens through normal exposure, normal experience. And that's why misophonia doesn't just go away. It does go away in a few people, but in most people it doesn't. It just strengthens with experience. So when you hear a sound and the brain stem sees that the lizard brain sees that you're tensing your shoulders, for example, sound, you're tense the shoulders. You do that 5 times, and that lizard brain says, I can help. I see a pattern here. I'll do that for you. And so then it's sound, and your shoulders go up. And it's like a learned fingernails on a chalkboard. Most people don't like the sound of fingernails on a chalkboard, not like misophonia trigger, not near as bad, but the problem is not the sound. The problem is that when people hear that screech sound, they shiver. They go, oh, stop, I hate that sound. Well, what they should say is stop, I hate shivering. Okay, so the brain, that lizard brain is always watching you, trying to see what you're doing and do it for you. It's the ultimate follower. It has no agendas. It has no creativity. It has no initiative. It just wants to do what it sees you doing. So, and after any stimulus, it watches the body for about 2 to 3 seconds. And in that 2-second period, if it sees a muscle tighten, it goes, oh, notice that. And then if it sees it again and again, it goes, I see a pattern, stimulus, 200 milliseconds, boom, and it hits the muscle. Now, that lizard brain is neurotic and insecure, so it's always checking itself. So if it says, okay, I hear that sound, John's going to tighten his shoulder muscles and goes and hits the shoulder muscles. And then it goes, did I do the right thing? And for 2 seconds, it's watching, did I do the right thing? And if the natural reaction to getting jabbed is to go, ah, and tighten that muscle, it goes, oh, I did the right thing. John loves me. If John is having a tough day and they've been triggered a number of times, it's trigger, boom, and they go, ah. You go, ooh, lizard brain says, next time I predicted correctly, but not strong enough. So next time I will hit that muscle harder. And so these physical reflexes get stronger and stronger and stronger. Now, if you're relaxed before a small trigger and it's trigger, boom, relax, the lizard brain goes, oh no, I did the wrong thing, and it will back down. So counter conditioning is achieved by having small, weak triggers and an opposite action in the body, which usually is relaxing, and having distraction, focusing your attention on other things to lessen the perception of the trigger and to allow you to stay relaxed. And so that trigger, it hits the muscle and you relax, the lizard brain says, I did the wrong thing. Trigger, relax, I still did the wrong thing. Trigger, relax, trigger, relax, trigger, and then it will back down. Now, there is a kind of a history. The reason it zaps you the first time is because there's a history of you tightening those muscles. So if it sees that you're not tightening those muscles, it's doing the wrong thing, that reflex will die down. But then an hour later, that experience is in the history file, and therefore it'll start zapping you again. Now this first off, I'm going to say that to many of you, you may not recognize this initial physical reflex component here. I've done a little bit of work with this and find that people generally do not recognize this. Let me see if I can bring up another little slide here. Okay, share this. So this is a little experiment I did where I said, do you have this initial physical reflex? And half the people, 5 out of 10 said no, 5 out of 10 said yes. After I showed them their reflexes, 9 out of 10 said yes, this person, we couldn't identify a physical reflex. I don't know whether some people actually don't have a reflex, a small percentage, or it's just not noticeable, because a lot of times when I have a person who doesn't notice it, then at a later time they find it. So this is kind of what you experience on a normal basis, and this is what's really happening. So what we want to do for counter conditioning is have you, again, engaged in some activity that you can focus your attention on. You can use noise, AirPods, noise app, getting further away from a trigger to reduce the severity of the trigger. Just hearing trigger after trigger after trigger makes misophonia worse. So don't just expose yourself to triggers hoping that it'll make your misophonia go down, because it won't. It will cause your misophonia to become worse. And that's why exposure treatment, exposure therapy is considered a great no-no for misophonia treatment. But weak triggers with engaged activity can allow that misophonia to come down. I worked with one. I'm a behavioral parenting coach. So by the way, if you've got drama with kids in your family, that drama and turmoil makes everybody more tense, and when you're more tense, it makes your misophonia worse. So I recommend calming down the family dynamics. And I'm a behavioral parenting coach. That's my primary career. I was working with a couple who had a 4-year-old that was hitting kids at preschool all the time. And so they were sent to me by the local, it was a preschool at a community college. So they sent the parents to me. We were working on this behavioral problem at school. Things were going really well. I mentioned misophonia. And this 40-year-old burly guy goes, "Oh yeah, that's me." I said, "You're kidding." He says, "No, I had this friend as a teenager who chewed so loud I couldn't stand it. Now my kids know it bothers me. They chew around me on purpose just to irritate me. And it drives me nuts." And we talked a little bit about his reflexes. He says, "Well, I clenched my fist and I clenched my jaw." And I had him do a couple of kind of visualizations, and it appeared that this was anger response, and his initial reflex was in his jaw. Now, for anyone who has a jaw reflex, if you find yourself clenching your jaw around triggers, if you will just try to relax your jaw and let your tongue just go forward, just let it go forward and touch the back of your bottom teeth, and it almost pushes your jaw down. Just try that. Let your jaw relax and let your tongue go forward, and your jaw just relaxes. So I told him, I said, "Look, you're eating with your family. If you will relax your jaw, while during dinner, it'll greatly reduce your misophonia." I said, "Now you can't just eat and relax your jaw. So you're going to have to eat before or after your family, but during dinner, just let your jaw be relaxed." He says, "Okay, I'll give it a try." Now, he trusted me because we had had great success with the 4-year-old. They went away. They came back 4 weeks later for their last session with me about their son, and the boy was doing great. I said, well, how's your misophonia? And he said, oh, it's gone. And I'm like, wow, after 20 years, his misophonia is gone after 4 weeks. I wonder how long it took. And I'm thinking a week or 2 weeks or 10 days or, you know. He said, well, at first, 30 minutes. I said, what do you mean 30 minutes? He said, well, I could just feel my jaw jerking, flinching, and after 30 minutes, it stopped. Now, the second day, the second dinner, it will have regrown, so maybe it would still zap him for 15 minutes, and then maybe 8 minutes, and then 4 minutes, and it just went away. And this is unusual because he had a single trigger problem, the eating sounds, and he had a very distinct muscle reflex in his jaw. But relaxed muscles with small triggers while you're focusing on something worthwhile is what sets the brain up to let this go, because it's your reflexive reaction to the lizard brain reflex that gets you. You hear a trigger, it hits the muscle, it's like you're being tasered, and then you reflexively go, ah, and give the feedback that what your lizard brain did was it predicted correctly, and it'll keep doing it. So let's look a little bit more at factors of counterconditioning. You being able to engage in an activity that is of interest to you, that you can focus on intently, not reading. I'm looking for a kind of a physical activity. Throwing a baseball would be great. Pulling weeds. I know a person whose misophonia went down drastically while they were pulling weeds. One man did counterconditioning while he did the dishes. He was a stay-at-home husband working on his MD, medical doctor work, studying a lot. So he would listen to a podcast and do dishes by hand. So doing dishes by hand is very tactile. You're feeling it, you're focusing on it, you're noticing it. He's listening to his podcast. That takes care of some of his minds, and that was one of his best counter-conditioning activities. There is an app called the Misophonia Trigger Tamer app. It's a blue head icon, and it has the ability to play small triggers at a rate and volume that you decide, so that you're in control, and that can allow counter conditioning to occur. The problem with the Trigger Tamer app is it's not a full solution, because it's a limited context, no variability. It does show that the reaction can go down, and it does help people to kind of accept small triggers. Okay, so that's a little bit about counter conditioning. Now there's two reflexes that you get with misophonia. One is the actual, I hear a trigger, I have these really horrible emotional physiological reaction. That's the actual to the actual trigger. There is also kind of a trauma response that develops for many people, and that is they remember a trigger situation. And when they remember being with, grandma as a kid at meals or whatever it is, and they go and you feel it, okay? So if you're brave enough to try this right now, you can go ahead and just close your eyes and relax. And you're not trying to remember the sound, you're just trying to remember that Thanksgiving dinner or that car ride or whatever it is. but just relax and then think of that event. And when you think of that event, if you feel it, then that is a trauma reflex that needs to be counter conditioned. And the way you counter condition that reflex is different than the way you counter condition the actual misophonia reflex. Okay, the primary misophonia reflex. So for the trauma reflex, what you would do is you want to be engaged in some really positive activity, endorphin producing activity, and then just have a very little memory and gone of that event, that little and then let it go. And when you do that, the endorphins of this positive event that you're engaging in start to contaminate the ugly or coat the ugliness of the trauma memory and have it decay and go down. And so for a lot of you, when you're going into a situation where you've been triggered before, and you start to develop this anxiety response in advance. And so if you can take that trauma memory response down so that it's boring, that can help you reduce your anxiety and good management so that you can have less anxiety. And that's how counter conditioning occurs, and part of why it's important and valuable. Harriet, I see your hand is up. Ask away.
Well, I have a great example of that. When I
Okay.
was 3, we were watching, I believe, Elvis Presley on maybe TV on probably whoever put him on. Well, it was a pretty interesting hip movement and the whole thing. People reacted in different ways to Elvis Presley. But I walked in front of the TV and did a real good Elvis, hip shrugging. Well, my parents burst into laughter. They thought it was hilarious, like a little kid,
Yeah.
and a second later, they were absolutely, telling me to stop doing that because for a little girl, this was considered vulgar, right? So, well, that's just one of my wonderful memories. But a great joy I have is walking around a track upstairs at a YMCA when they're playing music for an aerobics class below, and I'm going around that track for an hour doing every move that Billy Joel or I don't even know who, but in any rock and roll guy, every tune changes, I'm doing a different thing. And guess what? It doesn't bother anyone. I mean, I'm amazed, but everybody thinks it's cool,
Yeah.
So I think to do something that brings you joy that involves movement and sound, it can really, really help. I don't think maybe people understand why I even go there, but I go there for my joy, and
Yeah.
I think it just erases that sense of shame that because I was a girl, I wasn't supposed to be moving that way, Thank you.
Cool. Thank you for sharing that story. Nico, your hand's up.
Hi, Tom. Thank you so much. Yeah, I've been watching your videos and it's been very helpful. So I suffer from misophonia. Eating sounds are really triggering for me.
Okay.
That's from growing up. I mean, I don't want to belabor the point. It's not the place, but it is from growing up. Another triggering sound is typing.
Okay.
And typing is really
Typing triggers it?
anger inducing. And the reason why this is a problem for me is that I think maybe other people are in the similar boat is that, we have back to office, right? And so one of the challenges I've invested heavily in like noise canceling headphones. I have
Okay.
two, just in case one runs out of battery, blah, 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 at the office. And I feel that the misophonia is really isolating me from the office environment because
Okay.
I cannot interact with people. I find
Okay.
it very like socially isolating. And and the other raw problem is that my work is very much research focused, right? So like in order for me to pay attention, I cannot have these triggers happening all the time because I lose focus, right? And I get
Right. Right.
and because I don't control my environment, I just can't run away, right? I
Okay.
can't go to another room. I can't really just do
Right.
all sorts of things. So I'm wondering, like, just as an initial thought from you, like, how should I conceptualize or how should I think about the office with misophonia, right? Like people are typing, I can't control it, it's not their fault. I have to wear these noise canceling headphones. People talk to me, I don't even hear them because I'm playing music and I'm top
Right.
noise canceling. So it is a problem. And like first off, like, okay, so how do I conceptualize the problem? But then the second thing I wonder is how do I let people know, right? Like, hey, I'm not ignoring you. I'm not being rude. It's just that I can't deal with this, right? Like I'm in a situation that is not of my choosing that
Okay.
I really wonder what the social dynamics you think would be appropriate in this situation.
Okay, let me see if I can answer that. A couple of questions along the way. First off, do you have a supported kind office environment, or do you have a contentious um, office environment?
No, I would say people are friendly. There's
Okay.
no yeah, so I don't have any of those problems. It's
Okay.
just
You're not working in a mailroom,
no.
and because and the reason I say that is because if some places if you let out that you have a trigger or some sounds trigger you, then that's a problem. Are you willing to own up to misophonia?
Yeah, I don't have a problem with that.
Okay.
That's that. So my the thing is that like one of the concerns I have is what you were saying earlier, actually, which is that misophonia is not recognized as a problem, right?
Okay.
And I think the second reason that's an issue is that people may be dismissive of it or so like it is a question of like how do I approach the subject and like make, for example, HR know, hey, by the way, this is an issue I have. I am seeing a therapist, so I don't know if that's a vehicle or a way to try to get some assistance with this problem because I'm just fearful that this is not well known enough for people to take it seriously,
Okay.
right? So like that's a
Right.
concern I have.
Okay, so the office dynamics, because it sounds like you're allowed to wear your headphones and do your work. They're
Yes.
not requiring you to have your ears exposed to the noise. I would say I have misophonia, and to be able to concentrate, I need to block out office sounds.
Yeah.
That's it. I would just leave it that simple. That
Okay.
to for me to get I mean, I know a guy and I'm not sure I don't think he had misophonia, but he wrote patents for a company that I worked for a number of years, a startup company, and he would wear big earmuffs to
Right.
do his job because it allowed him to block out the world and focus and do his job. And I think you would be best to just put it from that light. I need
Yeah.
to block out the office, the random office sounds to be able to concentrate and get my work done. Now, I will say, Nico, if you have a single trigger like typing and you can identify your initial physical reflex,
Yeah.
there's two different typing sounds on the reflex finder. And if it happens to be in your jaw, then that's really easy to relax, or in your chest. Now, I want to mention the chest reflex for misophonia counterconditioning. Many people will hold, their breathing will change. They may breathe in, they may breathe out, they may hold their breath. It may be a diaphragm response, it may be a chest response. If you feel a trigger in your torso, try doing slow, steady breathing with the trigger when the trigger's happening. And if slow, steady breathing reduces the severity of the trigger, then your initial physical reflex is a breath reflex. And so the counter conditioning activity for a breath reflex is slow, steady breathing. I call it scuba breathing because in scuba diving, there's lots of different ways of breathing where you breathe and hold and out and hold. And different kind of breathing techniques. In scuba diving, the rule is you always breathe, you never hold your breath because of the pressure changes as you're going up and down in the water. And if you keep breathing, humming, singing, and you have a breath reflex, then that will set up counter conditioning events to reduce your trigger.
Yeah. So I have a question there just very quickly.
Okay.
So my reflex I've identified because I've watched your videos and I've been paying attention, and I feel like it's mostly in my stomach. It's like a kind of like anxiety, like kind of, that's what I would say is where I get, it's like an anger or like an anxiety response. And in terms of, yeah, so I would say that that's how it's manifesting in me. Yeah.
Okay. Let me ask a couple of quick questions. Do you routinely have digestive problems, stomach aches, upset
Not
stomach?
not really, no.
Okay. Okay. So let me propose.
Yeah.
It's probably not that.
Okay.
When you say stomach, you're talking the organ of the stomach, right? The inside
Or,
of you.
yeah, like in that general area. I
Right.
mean, yeah, maybe not
Okay.
stomach specifically, yeah.
Well, if it could be the abs, if you're
Okay.
tightening your abs,
Yeah,
okay?
could be.
Have you tried doing a test with someone, a friend, and have them just go click click on the typewriter to just barely trigger you?
So my partner and I, we also work from home, and his typing does drive me crazy. So when he's typing, I can literally go right now. He's working
Okay,
in.
hang on a second. You use the phrase when he's typing. You will not determine your initial physical reflex when he's typing because you've already had the emotions, you're already
Right.
into the physiological distress,
Right.
you're already too far downstream.
Exactly. Yeah.
You
I'm already
you
conditioned. Yeah.
you need to have him or use the free reflex finder
Yeah.
where it just plays click click
Uh-huh.
and then click click. What did I feel? And just barely bring it up to where you're just barely feeling something. Okay.
Okay.
And that's at the level you can find your initial physical reflex because the downstream is so overwhelming that with a real trigger, it's highly unlikely that people will know their initial physical reflex.
Right.
Did I answer your question? I didn't mean to
Yes,
cut
you
you
did.
off and
No, it's fine. No, I heard what you said. Yeah, no.
okay.
Yeah, so yeah, that I'll do that. I'll see if I can identify it.
Right.
Thankfully, I don't. The other thing is because it is typing, it's consistent, right? Like at work, it's not like a
Mm-hmm.
so that's kind of like the other problem is that like there's no let up.
Well, if you're not hearing it,
Right.
because it's not zapping you,
Yeah.
this is my misophonia demonstrator here, right? It's like click 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 and it
Yeah.
you're
Right.
being physically assaulted. So
Right.
let me cover one thing else. I'll get right to you in a second. I do want to say that counter conditioning, if you're doing counter conditioning within 30 minutes, you will see a decay in that trigger distress misophonia response. If you're not seeing a decay, if your reaction is going up, you're making your misophonia worse. You're not achieving counter conditioning. So you want to make sure that you're not trying to fight the dragon here and be tough with the triggers because that makes misophonia worse. You want to
Okay.
be strategic. You want to be relaxed. You want to be focusing on something else. One woman that I helped said that one of the, well, first off, she had a toe curl underneath with her reflex. And so she used progressive muscle relaxation training on her toes to learn to relax her toes. And she said one of the best helps for her was to carry on. That if she was cooking something and she walked through and her father made the trigger sound, she just kept on going and kept on doing and focusing on the activity that she was doing rather than mentally engaging and falling back into the trigger. So when you're doing counter conditioning, again, you want your mind, as I talked about, focusing, but you want to not be judgmental about the trigger. You want to not be commenting to yourself, but that's a horrible sound. They're so unfair. They're rude, and get rid of the judgment and the self-talk about the trigger, and engage in something and carry on. But counter conditioning means that your distress level or your reflex level to the trigger is actually coming down. And
Yeah.
if it's not coming down, it's not counter conditioning.
Okay.
Okay.
That's very helpful. Thank you so much.
That's key. Don't torture yourself. Okay, Elsa, your hand is up.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi. Okay. Hi. I'm Elsa. So in a also in the context of a romantic relationship, so my boyfriend, um, unfortunately also triggers me a lot. So um, how can you apply the counter conditioning with someone, with a partner, like in the daily? Because I can try to calm myself throughout the day, every day, but yeah, it's a bit difficult. Yeah. So do you have
Okay,
any recommendations on how to apply that in a relationship or
I
somebody that you live with?
I do. But first off, it's difficult. So one of your best friends is sound, noise. Get a 20-inch box fan and put one in each room. And it's cold when it's cold, you put it up against the wall, you put cardboard on the back of the box fan, and it makes most people find box fans make a pretty comforting sound. Get a sound generator, but you want to add noise to your home, not just music, because music doesn't block triggers the same way that noise does. So one, reduce the trigger severity by adding noise. The second thing is relax. See if you can determine where your initial physical reflexes are. It can be different for each trigger. But then just relax and try to live with your boyfriend more relaxed, okay? Because and people say, well, I can't relax. Well, it's better to do a poor job of relaxing than a good job of tensing up. Okay? So you want
Okay.
to relax, add noise, relax. Because he is a trigger source, you might actually, do you ever look at him to see if he's going to make a trigger?
Yes, a lot. Yeah.
If you look for triggers, you will find them. Okay? So I want you to ignore your boyfriend here, okay? Ignore him. Unless he's talking to you or you're talking to him, don't, the wrong thing. Just don't look at him. Look somewhere else. Just
Look
don't
away.
look
Okay.
away. Don't track him, because the more you think about him and you think, is he going to make a trigger now? Is he going to make a trigger now? Then you're anxious and you're on edge, and drives you nuts. So uh, don't track him to see when he's going to make a trigger. When there is a trigger, again, try to live your life there more relaxed with more sound and carry on. One of the things that you can do is you can focus on uh, physical stimuli. If you can notice how you can pinch the sides of your fingers, side, pinch, 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 pinch. And these are actually points, acupressure points, or meridian points is what they're called. And just
Mm.
do something that puts you into physical observation. I've got a card from my dentist here, and I can just look at the fonts that's going on, and I any physical sensory input reduces the awareness you have for other sensory inputs. So it's hard. It's really hard. And then when you need to, block it out completely. If you need to focus, if you need a break, there's nothing wrong with blocking it out completely for a time period. You really want to be, as you live with a person that with your misophonia, you really want to live your life in two modes. Either one is counter conditioning mode, where I'm getting small triggers, I can relax, I can carry on, focus on other things, or I'm just putting on my headphones and doing a personal activity. Okay, so those are kind
Thank you
of
very
the two
much.
modes. You're welcome. Okay,
Yeah.
I don't know who had their hand up next. I think let's go with Lindsay. I haven't heard from you today.
Hello, I'm
Hello.
Lindsay. So I'm actually here as a parent of somebody with misophonia. My son was actually diagnosed after he had 2 back-to-back concussions. They're, I think, stemming it from there. I don't know for sure.
Okay.
But so a lot of his triggers are, I think, just the everyday, like triggers him. Sniffling triggers him. So wintertime is absolutely hard. He can't even go to church at
Okay.
this point because of lip smacking, gum chewing. He can't even be in the same room if someone's chewing gum.
Okay.
I guess we're new to like working through a lot of this stuff. We've tried different things ourselves. He self-isolates. He does the headphones, you know, his earbuds,
Okay.
constant earbuds in his ears. I think one of his biggest problems, though, is he also has severe ADHD, which leads to impulse control.
Okay.
So when he has a trigger, he has a very elevated reaction where he gets very angry and he will say things or give nasty looks.
Okay.
And we're just...
How old is your son? Lindsay, how old is your son?
18.
Okay. Is he motivated to change?
Yeah.
Okay. You need a help from a competent therapist. It takes time, it takes effort. We're starting, you don't happen to live in the Dallas-Fort Worth area of Texas, do you?
No.
Okay, because in September, Misophonia Institute is funding Dr. Sam Spencer's lab to do a misophonia treatment trial. But this doesn't just go away. It tends to get worse with triggers.
A lot of his triggers have been, some of them have gone away. Like he used to be triggered by coughing. It's no longer triggered by coughing,
Okay.
but he's also triggered by facial tics. And my daughter and myself both have facial tics.
Okay, so this comes back to counter conditioning and relaxing, learning where how to relax, developing potentially the neurological ability to relax certain muscles with muscle relaxation training. This is a huge challenge, and it's too complex to I mean, relax and add noise to the world. That's kind of the biggest thing I can tell you, other than getting some very significant help with this. But do you have noise generally playing in your home?
Not constantly. He has his own space.
Okay, but when he's out and about in the family area, is he wearing headphones with some noise in it, or is he
He always has his earbuds with him.
Okay.
Like if he starts, like we were just at the doctor's office for neurology, and the lady was smacking her lips and it was triggering him, and he just kept getting madder and madder. And the problem is these have actually led to full-blown like breakdowns because he just it's, I mean, more than half the world says as they talk, and it just, and he did find that mimicry can help the response. He'll mimic us.
Okay.
And it'll help lessen the response, but when you mimic people that don't know you, it just becomes rude.
Yeah, and that's unfortunate, because misophonia is unfortunate. I would say that I I would suggest we have an initial session to try to identify his physical responses and help him understand what's happening with misophonia, and then have him try to relax around normal life. That when he walks out of his room into the living room, into the family area where he might be triggered, he's trying to relax rather than tensing up. But there's not a simple solution here.
I would
Okay.
love that, and I'm sure I could get him to sit down and talk too with
Okay.
us. But thank
So
you.
here's a commercial. Anybody send me an email about misophonia treatment. I will send you a form letter that blurb of here's what I do, and if you want to do it, you can send it to me. Okay.
I will do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Lindsay. Melissa.
Yes. I'm kind of in the same situation as Lindsay. My son's 19. He does the clenching of his jaw and his fist when we're in public. If we are home, he goes into a full-blown rage, meaning he has holes in his walls. He has his chair in his room is busted. He has a wood floor and there's nicks in his floor from physically jamming or physically throwing his chair into his floor. So I don't know where to go from that and how to handle that.
He's 19, right?
Yes,
First off, remember what he's experiencing is far worse than what you're experiencing with this.
correct.
I would say that potentially he needs to know that he's financially responsible for what he's doing, and he needs to find another coping technique. He needs to find another way of relieving the distress that he experiences when he's triggered. Focusing your attention on something, go for a jog, do something other than physically breaking things, just doing that physical reaction. There's been some research on how do you calm down, and they had two groups of people, and one they gave them punching bags and get the anger out, and the other group they said sit down and relax and rest. And they irritated everyone on purpose, right? And then they
Yes.
separated them to do their activity. They brought them back and they tried to irritate them a little bit and measure their irritation. The people who had relaxed instead of venting their anger, the relaxation group had less anger the second time. So venting your emotions is not the best thing to do. Let's put it that way. Okay.
Okay. Now,
There's also something called a drug called propranolol, 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 and it's a beta blocker. It's called. It reduces the cortisol surge to the body after a trigger, and that can be beneficial for some people. It's a blood pressure medicine. It's a presentation anxiety medication. It doesn't have to be ramped up. And if you had your family physician write you a prescription for that to try, it's a relatively, it's not something that you have to ramp up over time and ramp down over time. You'd know immediately if it's beneficial.
okay, now he has tried that, and I
Okay.
actually have it in my hand to make sure that's what you were speaking of. And
Okay.
he said it made him angry. We
Okay.
did
Then
speak, we
don't
did
that.
speak to the, yeah, we stopped it.
Okay. Now it's not going to stop the anger. See, this doesn't stop
Hmm.
you have the stimulus, the trigger, you have a physical jolt to the body, you have an emotional explosion, and then you have a physiological response. And so this is actually the propranolol works on the fourth step. Okay, so I can understand why he's still very angry. It doesn't stop the anger.
Okay, and also you spoke about a study that is going on in September. We're
Yes.
actually in the middle of doing the Duke University study. I don't know if you're familiar with that one, where the MRIs and they're exposed to TMS treatments.
No, I'm not at all. I'm very happy that they're looking at TMS.
Okay, yeah, he actually had his first MRI last week. We go back June 15th for 4 TMS treatments, and then they'll
Okay.
do a second MRI 4 days later.
Great. Wonderful. I think TMS has the potential to be a benefit here. So
Okay,
I wish him well.
thank you.
Okay. Nico.
Yeah, this is a very quick statement about ambient noise. So
Okay.
you talked about the fan. Another way of doing it if you don't have a fan actually is a Bluetooth speaker. And
Yes.
I would connect an app that is really good for white noise is called Soundcore.
Sound core. Okay.
Yeah, so it has like tons of different options in terms of white noise. So if you don't like one white noise, there's like tons, dryer noise, jacuzzi noises, airplane noises. You can mix and match ambient noises. So I
Yeah.
would download that app and get a Bluetooth speaker. That might be actually very helpful for people. So I just
Okay.
want
That's a great app. Let me put in a plug for somebody who I get no money from, but these blue soundbar and red soundbar app and the gray one. This is White Noise by TMSOFT, and it gives the features that Nico's talking about. You also can download sounds from other that's been uploaded by other people, and you can record your own, and you can make mixes. So Soundcore, White Noise, Light. It's one of these very versatile apps. So both of those are good. Okay, thank you, Nico. Do we have another comment, Elsa?
Hello, hi, this
Hi.
is PJ again, Elsa's friend. So my question is, what is the physical slash chemical slash structural difference in the brains of someone that has misophonia and someone that does not have misophonia?
Okay, good question. So first off, let me say that misophonia, I'm going to go back to share this model of misophonia. Misophonia develops because of this initial physical reflex, which is Pavlovian conditioning, which is normal human neurology. Okay, this is a normal functioning human neurology that causes misophonia to develop. But structurally in the brain, we have seen the work from Dr. Sukhbinder Kumar, who showed that there's a lot of activity here between the anterior insula, which is an emotional regulation structure, the ventromedial prefrontal cortex, which because of all the activity, you get a lot of the myelination of the neurons and down into the amygdala and hippocampus. This structure is an emotional reflex learning structure, so that there's a physical reflex, there's an emotional reflex, and this is the area of the brain. But anytime a person is doing something over and over and over again, there's going to be manifestations in the brain. So my understanding is that it's not due to that misophonia causes the myelination and the activity in this area, not the activity in this area cause misophonia. So as far as I have read and heard, and especially with the Pavlovian conditioning model, it's not a brain defect.
Okay. Yes, I thought so as well. I do have a question because if I can ask one other question,
Please.
so I have this pounding sound in my ears, and you mentioned of previous like relaxing your muscles and things like that. But I can hear my own heartbeat in my ears. And sometimes that, like currently, like now, I can hear it, and it's very distressing in terms of like it feels like I'm going insane. Does
Okay.
that make sense?
Yes.
Like,
So
no.
this is the same problem that people with tinnitus have, or tinnitus, where
Okay.
it's a phantom sound. And yours is not phantom, it's your own heartbeat, but it's the awareness of that sound that's the problem. Now, I have tinnitus, and when I mention that, and anybody on the line here that has tinnitus, you're hearing your tinnitus now if you haven't been noticing it. But I just ignore it. I also have a rumble in my, I believe it's in my right ear, that when I move my throat a certain way, I get the blah, 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 blah. And so I just ignore it. And and it really, trying to worry about it, thinking you're going crazy, thinking it's a problem, that is what makes it a problem with tinnitus. That's what makes something a problem, that you don't simply let it go and carry on with whatever you're doing.
Okay. So
That's
kind of like a,
go ahead.
sorry, like a form of mindfulness would
Yes.
probably, like, for example, you would acknowledge the noise and then you would say that's normal, that's normal, it's not a
Yeah.
bad thing, and then continue on and you keep on doing that cycle until
Yeah.
you feel better.
Yes.
Okay, that's
So
wonderful.
with my tinnitus, one morning here at my desk, I yawned and I stretched, and I heard a French police car for my tinnitus. Doo, 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 doo. And I just went, wow, that's weird. And I carried on.
Oh, okay, no, that's a
So,
perfect. I'll remember that when I hear my heartbeat as well.
okay. Okay.
The French police car.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Melissa, do you have a question for us?
Well, actually, it's well, kind of.
Okay. Sure. Go ahead.
You had asked another participant in the conversation if she was going to be in the Fort Worth, Dallas area in September. What study is that, and where is it being held?
Are you in that area?
I'm not, but I'm willing to go.
Okay. Well, you'll have to go live there for 6 months.
Oh, oh wow. So
Okay.
it's well, I
Maybe
have a
not
friend. I
6
could
months,
send
but
my son over there for 6. I wish I.
so it's for adults.
Okay.
Dr. Sam Spencer is going to be conducting it. Um, we had a GoFundMe. We have a GoFundMe site up. Running. Misophonia Institute is funding this activity, and so it'll be announced on the. I'll announce it through the email when we start to get to that point of
Okay.
doing it. But it's at the University of North Texas. So
Okay.
Dr. Sam Spencer, University of North Texas.
Okay. I do have a quick question. As far as seeing an audiologist and getting, I guess they would fit him for earplugs. Do you know anything about, or hearing devices? Do you know anything about that and using those?
So you're talking about a device like this, which is
Yes.
a hearing aid. These were originally developed for tinnitus,
Yes.
and it allows you to discreetly play noise to your ears. Some people love these, some people do not like these. They're, $2,000 to $4,000 for
Okay.
a pair of these. Some people like them a lot, they love them. Some people don't.
Now, is that different versus you? My son wears his earphones, but he plays YouTube videos and stuff. He doesn't play anything calming. He plays something that's more stimulating to him. So
Well, it's not that you want to play something calming for the device.
okay,
You want to play something that is blocking, or sorry, distracting from the sound.
okay,
So that's where we talked about the noise apps. Nico and I talked about the two different noise apps, and having a noise app that has babbling brook or rain sounds or something that helps mask the clickiness of a particular trigger, that can be very beneficial. And with the hearing devices, you can play your phone through the ones now, but they typically do not do noise canceling.
okay,
Okay, so it's not a it's not the same blocking ability that you get from AirPod Pros, for example.
Okay. Okay.
Okay.
I'm sorry to ask you again, the app that you were speaking, that you showed Nico. I know you
Okay.
put your phone up and it
Okay.
was like different colors.
Yeah, it's white noise. The easiest way to find it, it's
Okay.
the vertical sound bar. White
Okay. Okay.
noise light, LITE. That'll take you to the pink one. And you look
Okay.
around, you get the blue one and the gray one. If you go to the pink one and you say, I want to add a sound,
Mm-hmm.
you hit the add a sound, it'll say, well, you need the white noise light app, and it's a free app. So
Okay.
the blue one is $1, the pink one is free, and there's an ad on each page, so you can decide if you want the $1. I recommend people to get the $1 version.
Okay.
And I'm going to hit manage at the bottom. It throws it into list mode. And then I can do sounds and mixes. And I can actually record my own sounds if I want to, and I can create mixes with the sounds. And that's
Okay.
what, okay?
Okay. I
All
appreciate
right.
it. Thank
You're
you.
welcome. Elsa, question or comment?
Oh, sorry, no, the hand was just up. I forgot to
Okay.
take it off.
Okay. Well, everyone, it's been a great to meet with you. We're running to the end here, so I would like to review counterconditioning. Counterconditioning is a neurological process that occurs when you're doing something opposite of the reflex that's developed, right? That's the counterconditioning. So you can accomplish counterconditioning with relatively weak triggers, which adding noise can bring the triggers down, relaxing and or steady breathing, depending on where that reflex is, and being non-judgmental and keep your focus on another activity and carry on in that activity. And in a 30-minute time period or less, usually less, you'll notice that reaction starts coming down, and that's counterconditioning. That means that reflex is decaying through neurological change in your brainstem. And counterconditioning is the mechanism, the neurological mechanism by which we can reduce the meso reflexes in real life situations. I was working with the young men at church, and this one young man, we were on a camp out, and he said, "Hey, Brother Dozier, what do you do?" And I'm a behaviorist, a parenting coach, misophonia. What's misophonia? And I explained it, and two of them said, "Oh yeah, I have misophonia." And one of them just said, "Yeah, it's just my sisters. Just my sisters singing drives me. I just can't stand it." And I talked about relaxing. I said, "Look, try to relax and carry on when it's happening." And he did that, and I saw him about 6 months later by himself and asked him about his misophonia. He says, "Oh yeah, it's gone." But he didn't have super severe clinical misophonia, right? But this is how these reflexes can die out and extinguish. Okay, Elsa, your hand is still up again. If you have a question, you can ask it. If not,
Okay, so it's PJ again. So I do have a
PJ.
question. One
Yes.
last question. So I just wanted to know if I wanted to find more reliable information about misophonia, or if I were to want to like ask more questions, if more questions come up about like family or strangers or things like just normal day-to-day things of that triggers misophonia, and if I don't know how to help with that, where can I find more help for that?
Okay, so misophonia.org is our nonprofit information website with all the kind of stuff that I've been telling you about. And it also gives you information about that research study that's going to be coming up. So misophonia.org would be where I would recommend you to go. There's a series of videos there about misophonia. There's many articles about misophonia. So and there's resources to go for help. Okay?
Perfect. Thank you so
Okay.
much. We really
You're welcome.
appreciate all your work.
Okay, thank you, PJ. All right, everyone. Thank you very much. Been a pleasure meeting with you, and I will be here next Saturday morning or evening, depending on where you're located. All right.
Thank you,
you very
Tom.
much. You're welcome. Bye-bye.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.